Welcome to the Tech Simple podcast. Independent insights into the latest AV technologies, as well as tips and best practices to optimize AV solutions for modern workplace and learning environments. Here are your hosts, David and Jonathan from Konnectus AV Consulting.
Welcome back to another episode of the Tech Simple podcast. As always, I'm joined by my good friend and colleague, David Allara. David, welcome.
Hello, Jonathan. Hello, world, as they say. Here we are, season 2, Jonathan, of the podcast, 2024. You excited?
I am very excited. It's the first episode for the season. I was ecstatic about what we achieved last year. Some really great episodes with some really great guests.
Absolutely.
And today I'm quite excited about this one. I think it's very fitting for the first episode of the year. David, tell us a little bit more about what we're going to be talking about.
Well, it is fitting. I mean, start of the year, it's a great time to reflect on the year that's gone. What happened in Pro AV? What were the trends? And then the flip side of that is, well, what are we going to see? What does 2024 look like? How's it going to affect your business, your customers, end customers that are listening to this? And I think that's probably going to be a pretty exciting, conversation. We've got 2 guests here from AVIXA. Now, we've had guests from AVIXA, the CEO of AVIXA, David, on the show before in 2023. But AVIXA, for those of you that don't know, is the Audiovisual and Integrated Experience Association. It's the association for professional AV all around the world. And today we have Sean Wargo and Peter Hansen. And they're going to introduce themselves properly because they know themselves better than I do, of course. But they have a wealth of experience researching the market, researching trends, gathering data, analyzing that data from all over the world, all different sectors in AV. So they really are best placed for us to pick their brains today, Jonathan, and understand a little bit about, well, what happened last year, what's going to happen this year, and maybe when we get to the end of this little episode, what's going to happen in the years beyond 2024. So that could be pretty exciting. What do you say?
Absolutely.
Well, without further ado, let's welcome our guests, Peter and Sean. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us, David.
Pleasure to be with you.
Well, let's get kicked off just with a couple of brief introductions so we can give some context to the listeners. So, Sean, you're obviously working at AVIXA. Can you give us an overview of what it is you do and the value you kind of bring to AVIXA?
Sure, happy to. So Sean Wargo, I'm Vice President of Market Intelligence. Essentially what that means is my team's responsible for putting together all the research assets that we produce throughout the year, industry forecasts, macroeconomic studies. We also do end user demand side studies. So basically what are end user buyers of technology, what are they planning to build out? What are they focused on? So a pretty full calendar every year of research that helps us understand kind of the size and direction of the market so we can help inform, do trends, types of presentations and whatnot out for the benefit of our members and our general audiences.
Okay, fantastic. So I guess that information must be highly valuable, for those wanting to understand, well, what's happening in the AV market? What are the trends? And, I would have thought manufacturers, as well as distributors, as well as designers, consultants, end users could all get great value out of the information you get from your studies. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. Yeah, that you've nicely summarized kind of our user base. Manufacturers is probably the core of who consumes a lot of our data, since as you can imagine, they have hardware products that they're trying to bring to market. So they're trying to understand what the potential uptake of those will be. I would put second, certainly distributors, similar fashion. They're trying to really see how's the wind blowing, honestly, with end user intent and utilization of technology so they can have the right product mix, the right brand mix, the right service mix, honestly, as they go bring their offerings to market. Last but not least, certainly integrators as well. We do a ton of research, particularly on the macroeconomic and compensation side that benefits them to understand how much are AV professionals paid, what skill sets are important, how's the hiring, the sort of context for their business, as well as just a lot of business issue type of research, understanding trends like AI or XR, the kind of cutting edge stuff, and how we're seeing that play out in the AV landscape. So yes, across the board, a lot of different user types for the information we're producing, and honestly, even tech managers, those kind of embedded in companies to see what their peers are doing, what trends are happening, how is AV being used, the stuff we're planning to talk about today as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to. I think that can that information definitely for business owners, especially having access to that type of data and the quality of that data. I'm sure can really help them make the best decisions they can make for their business and their people and their customers. So
for sure, yes,
that's going to be really good to dig into a little bit later. So over to you, Peter. So tell us a little bit about what you do, Peter. I know you work with Sean, but you've got a slightly more specialized capacity. Tell us about it.
Exactly. I'm the economist on Sean's team. So I'm in charge of a couple of our channels of research. One is our macroeconomic trends analysis, our meta reports, which take on the biggest economic issues, and then really also just the biggest trends affecting the pro AV industry. So in the past year, that's been the things like the threat of recession, the convergence between AV and IT, and the rise of AI and what it means for AV. And then what I try to bring to the table is this slightly different perspective from maybe just the normal ways that, like, business leaders who have like the pure business background, who maybe work at, larger integrators or larger distributors and manufacturers, or say like the tech people that can, I've got this economics background, so I think a little bit different questions, and then hopefully just add that little bit of something that maybe would not have been considered by someone with a more traditional background. It's not a better decision than you would make yourself. It's that information that helps you make a better decision than you would without. And honestly, it's such a privilege actually to work at an association, because it connects us to so much of the industry that we have this like special data position where we can take these questions that listeners are tuning into your podcast to hear about. They're reading in trade publications. That's one person's perspective, or 3-4 person's perspective on a podcast, and we can just say, let's get 300 like vetted AV professionals, put that to them, and understand if it's like, are you just hearing that one person who's like representing an left field view, or is this the consensus view? How does that distribution actually look like in reality, to kind of help penetrate the fog on a lot of these complex, uncertain issues?
Well, Pete, you'd be perfectly placed then to, I guess, transition straight into the topic I want to talk about first, and that is, we're at the end of 2023, and it's a good time really to reflect on what we've seen. It's a fast-paced industry, especially this year. I think with what we've seen, with AI emerging more towards the start of the year and then accelerating, and who knows next in the future years. But what do you think were the top 2 or 3 things we saw in the pro AV industry? I know that's a broad question, but maybe try and pick the top 2 or 3 things that are relevant to workplace, but also other markets.
Well, we highlighted a few issues actually in our State of the Industry report, which I think is probably publication hasn't happened as of recording, but probably will have happened by the time of publication. So if you're listening to this, you can probably check out the report. But a few of these were, one, the resolution of supply chain issues. Huge challenge for so many professionals, especially last year, probably mid to late, like early fall maybe, or late summer. Just massive delays holding up a lot of projects, financial positions that were difficult for especially a lot of integrators who maybe had spent the money, acquired the equipment, but only had 90% of what they needed to complete the project, so they couldn't complete the project, they couldn't bill. That was a big deal. And in our most recent data, we do a monthly survey, and one of the questions is, what is your top issue? Supply chains around this time last year was the majority response. In November, it was 13% of folks selecting it, which was the same percentage as the percent of folks saying, I actually didn't have a big business issue. So that's a pretty crazy transition.
Wow.
It's not so severe as it was once upon a time, right?
Yep.
And then I'll say one other one that's been really big is the lack of impact from return to in-person. That's maybe a little bit less important for the corporate office market. You talk about office space in general, in the sense that the office space kind of had this unique path, in terms of like Pro AV revenue through the pandemic, where, if you talk about early on corporate office, all of a sudden there was a fair bit of spend trying to create remote compatibility, facilitate this transition. And then companies thought they were going to be back to the office, and so they were trying to build out a little bit of hybrid capabilities. But then we reached 2022, late 2022, into 2023, and companies like, how much? What are these norms? And a lot of uncertainty started to settle in. So we've seen when you think about revenue for different parts of AV, 2022 is this big growth around a lot of AV, but especially in-person technologies. That's in-person solution areas, like a little bit less corporate office market, but included there. And then 2023, except for like purest live events, which had the most delayed return in person, it is having a really nice year. The rest of the industry has been a lot more not this good, like weak. Not to say that it's like contracting, but if you're an AV provider not working in live events, you're probably having a tougher year than you were hoping for at the start of 2023. I think the way we said it, 2023 entered with cautious optimism. We set a new record for Pro AV revenue overall, and there's reasons to be positive based on that. Some growth expected, reasons to be negative, and maybe lean a little bit more towards the caution that they have the optimism with just lack of growth from return to in-person. And ongoing uncertainty in the corporate office market, that's been a challenge. So those two trends are probably the improvement in supply issues, and then this transition out of the pandemic, creating some growth challenges in 2023.
Yeah, I would add to that.
What would you say, Sean? Yeah. Why is that happening, I suppose, is the next question, the obvious question.
Yeah, I think there's two other sort of things that we've noticed through 2023 that Peter's kind of talking about. I would characterize it as almost inflection point moment. We've used the words or the phrase a bullwhip kind of effect in the marketplace. So as we all know, recovery from pandemic or adaptation to new work modes as we came out of the pandemic was an important driver as we came through, and now we're on the backside of that, and so it's shifting. So I'm seeing two things. One is standardization. We're starting to see a lot more standardized approaches to how you accommodate for hybrid, how you create meeting equity, how you solve some of the intrinsic challenges that the new hybrid work mode has brought about. The other thing I'm seeing alongside of that is creative utilization or new use case for space. So there's been a lot of research, a lot of talk. Peter and I follow this very closely as well, is kind of what's the current occupancy rates within buildings, what is the trend in leasing, particularly here stateside, kind of what does that data look like? And so far, most of the data is saying companies are kind of holding or spending about the same amount on space, even if they may be downsizing and moving up to sort of a Class A space. As they're doing that, they are starting to standardize around how they equip the space. So there's some great concepts coming out from companies like Microsoft for their Microsoft Teams rooms with their signature solution or signature room that shows how you can reorient the space and use different technology to continue that sort of more hybrid feel or virtual feel for a meeting where each speaker has its own camera angle or at least its own frame in the meeting. Same with audio, it's tracking the individual user. AI comes over the top, helps optimize. So it gives us more of an equity of experience. So I think that standardization is helping markets. helping customers figure out how to approach the problem. Integrators gives them something to work toward. But at the same time, because of that, we saw in 22 there was in some cases, oversaturation of product. There's been a little bit of a sort of pullback or more of a modular and a volume approach to building out solutions. So conferencing collaboration solution area has actually slowed dramatically in 2023.
Yeah.
The counterpoint to it, though, is where the growth
That's
is.
quite interesting, Sean, actually.
Yeah.
We're seeing something quite similar. I think through the pandemic in the early stages, there was a big rush to just enable communication. And, there was no real thought process. It was like, I just need something. I need people to talk to each other. They need to see each other, and we need to continue with business going on. And 2023, people, as you say, there was this bit of an inflection point to say, okay, well, just being able to talk to each other and communicate, well, we need something better than that. We need to be able to be far more effective. Let's take a step back and review what we've done so that, as you say, we can kind of standardize that approach and actually produce a good experience for our people rather than just an experience.
Absolutely. Scalability comes to mind as well. As you're kind of saying, it's scalability, replicability, if that's a true word. I think so. But the notion of being able to replicate an experience across several different installations, sites within the office. So I agree with you. I think what predominantly seems to be happening is a move more towards that scalable and replicable type of experience. At the same time, there's space that's not hadn't been as used or is open now that some of the workers are not coming in every day. The average seems to be globally about 3 days in office. So there's some space to use for other purposes. And that's the other thing we've been talking a lot about is you are increasingly seeing, we have a solution area we call content production and streaming. Essentially, that means the ability, the capacity for an organization to record content, optimize and distribute it out to reach audiences, to reach customers, to reach employees, marketing, social, all the sorts of things. That's become common language now. So we saw this coming pre-pandemic. Video was becoming the common language as evidenced by first YouTube and now TikTok and other. So I think enterprises are embracing that. So we're actually seeing in our surveys, our quarterly demand surveys, that AV production rooms for broadcast within corporate environment, within enterprise environment, is an area of focus for companies. To us, that means space is getting rekitted, reimagined, reused. Let's say they're putting up at the high end a virtual production type of installation. At the more low kind of manageable end is small green screen or say recording booth for podcast or other sorts of ways to capture content. So we're seeing that as also another opportunity that I think relates to the broader experience economy and events, entertainment, concerts, all those things that are have stepped up and have really returned in earnest in 23.
So that production in-house, so that's an interesting point. That's something that was, in the past outsourced. An organization would go to an external party, they would come in and they would fully manage that and facilitate that recording or that streaming. And, maybe that happens once, twice, 3 times a year. But if you're doing it, every month, every week, and trying to produce a lot of content to feed those kind of TikToks and YouTubes and social media channels, that's no longer really a viable option. You bring it in-house.
Absolutely.
I would say that the gap closes a little bit in a couple of ways. One is, with the rise of TikTok and similar like Instagram Reels and such, we're more used to sort of like sub-production level, still quality, but not like A+ grade, where you're like, I have to go to a production studio. Like it's easier, it's a more accessible price point to enter if you're an office building, right?
Yeah.
And then 2, it's kind of democratized a little bit. The number of people in a given, if you have like a 150-person company, you've probably got a couple people who've made a few TikToks. So it's like those skills are maybe a little bit less difficult to find. It's easier to say like your social media manager or your like someone on your IT team, like when you're sort of like piecing together, like, hey, what if we like had a podcast, or like, what if we made part of our marketing, a little bit of thought leadership on LinkedIn, whatever, right? Whatever this question is, like, and you're asking, like, how feasible is that? It's a lot, I would say, more feasible in 2023 in terms of staff that you can hire and maybe have on staff, or you can upskill them a little bit than it was in 2018, right? So I think that barrier to entry in a lot of ways has closed.
One of our clients that resonates with them, they use this term hackable. And what they're finding is, the generations coming into the workforce aren't too discouraged with things not working, and they will just make it work. And it may not be perfect, or it may not be, full AAA production, but they get the job done. And then they get on with their day and go on to the next thing. And that kind of supports what you were just saying then, Peter, about, you have that talent in-house already, and hey, maybe it's not a AAA Hollywood studio production, but it gets done.
Exactly. And I was just to say that we're also like, our standards for video conferencing are coming up as well. So, maybe you already got some hardware in there, some good microphones, like you have, because you have a conference room or you have a specific, virtual event that you wanted to make sure like your CEO's voice got out there in perfect quality. So you drop some money on a proper Shure microphone or whatever, a true professional quality brand, right? And therefore, on that conferencing collaboration standard is also rising and kind of making more access to that, opening the door more to taking the step into some content creation.
I agree. I think that's another key driver as we've come. 22, you could say it started to take shape. 23, I think it solidified in the market. And that is each of our individual expectations for the conferencing experience, the hybrid call experience has been elevated. We sort of, when we go, as people went back to the office, they were expecting it to still be this sort of individual person, individual frame, the discussion. So many people found it's when you come back to the traditional boardroom and you're oriented across the table, the camera's at the front, it just doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't fit the style of meeting engagement that we want. That and plug and play, we expect our laptops to be able to connect readily, share content easily. We expect good audio quality, expect good video quality. And I think, as you're saying as well, used to be outsourced. I think now that standards raised as well, while outsourced partners can do a good job, I think it's needing to become more of a core competency for organizations. And so the bar's getting raised too, that while as you said, Jonathan, it doesn't have to be AAA, maybe it has to be AA, right? It's got to be an acceptable, fairly good video and audio quality, production quality to be accepted by your audiences. Though good enough is fine. I think there's still an expectation that it's going to wow to some degree. So all of that's been raised in the process. Fortunately, the tools are more accessible. The technology is more accessible.
Well, that's a good point. The tools are getting a lot better, and that's definitely something I've seen, in 2023, especially in the camera technology. Camera technology has come a long way, and they've now got, sort of automatic tracking cameras that work quite well. You can have a presenter standing at the front of a space, and the camera can actually follow them without having to have someone standing there with a joystick controlling the camera and framing up the presenter. Or as you say, in a large room, in a boardroom where you've got that long table, camera automatically picks out each person's individual face and makes it look like, hey, this is a Zoom gallery, but everybody's actually sitting in the room itself. So it doesn't have to be AAA, maybe AA, but also, the technology to support those people has improved a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
And I want to unite a couple of points that, Jonathan, you said, Sean, you said about end users taking a step back in 2023 after, the early pandemic was just get something that works. And now the post-pandemic is like, let's take a step back and really come up with a strategy, a plan. What are these rooms going to look like? What is our office going to look like? And then Sean, you're talking about, these folks got used to having these calls. Each face that they want to see is properly framed. It comes up when they're speaking. Communication is really viable. You can hear well. Every person can hear well and be heard well. And so when you kind of unite all that, with the additional fact that the traditional video down the like the corporate boardroom or down any conference room board, like those calls are difficult. It's still in 2023. The quality average on those calls that are hybrid is not good in my experience. I never met someone who's like, oh, really? They're great. So I think that our industry still has a bit of work cut out for itself to really defend its space and make sure the movement isn't just towards let's just all, every time we have individuals who are calling in and it's not an in-person conference, we'll just all take it from our desk, because the desk experience is good and it's difficult to match it. And so in order to defend the Pro AV, or the conference room, the hybrid conference room, we're going to have to figure out how to do things a bit better and prove to end users. Because if you go back, to 2019, you were selling, an end user video conferencing is the way of the future. The attitude is yes, I'm making an investment for the future, right? And now it's am I making an investment for the future if I just not realized that the video conferencing room, it will always be used, to be sure. There's always going to be used, but just that my office, the people in the office just going to prefer to take all those calls from their desk. Am I going to look like a fool for making this investment in this room because the quality is not going to match if every single person is on their USB camera? So I think that's a big part of why companies and users are taking a step back and being conservative with their investment, both on price point and also just number. Certainly the standard's really high. And for those rooms where they're going to be hybrid video conferences, and video's now standard, you can't just do audio. So there are movement toward that. That's just factual. But I think in terms of the total number, how many end user companies are really rolling that out for lots of conference rooms, there are big kind of quality issues, cases that need to be made to really reinforce the demand, because companies are taking a step back now, Jonathan, just like you said. They're careful with their investments. They know the future is hybrid, and they're measuring what they're going to spend and invest in going forward.
Yeah, I think that's coming. So I agree with the notion, certainly that, as we talked about, the expectation for quality, our bar has been raised. We sort of now expect this kind of seamless, usable, consistent experience, whether we're in an office, whether we're at home. What I think is changing, the key to the success as people go back to office, is reimagination of space as well. So clearly the video technology now, the audio technology, the microphones with AI built in, the sorts of things that we're starting to see where it isolates better. I would posit that the in-office experience is soon going to eclipse, actually, the in-home experience, because of the concepts I'm seeing now that actually do a really good job of elevating the quality. So you can have people in person, you've reoriented the room in a clamshell fashion, or a guitar pick fashion actually is another mode, where you're seeing sort of the triangle sort of effect with people. So the people in person are now facing each other and oriented to front at the same time. So camera isolates each one. And so when you're talking to each other and if somebody's remote, they're watching as well. They see each person in the room individually. As well, you've got AI over the top that's optimizing room and experience and audio. So it's coming. And I think that's what I've meant about standards now coming into place, standard approaches, solutions that help to make this a better experience as you go back to office. Granted, 100% agree that most offices are behind that curve. It's ours is a good example where we still have some legacy tech in space that's just not yet set up to create that same sort of quality experience that we're used to at home. The things that we've sort of accepted a little bit in the in-home experience is Wi-Fi and its lack of reliability. So we have call drops, we've got freezing, we've got audio issues. We do have issues at home. And so that is some of the things too that an office wired fiber optic direct line connection is going to create an even better experience for us from an overall fidelity experience. So all of that to say, yeah, I think absolutely true. We're seeing it in all of our numbers. We're hearing it from companies that we work with that by and large, enterprise customers, they're sort of pulling back a little bit, reassessing. This is true in higher ed, actually, in a big way as well. We're seeing it there to sort of reassess, look at landscape, and then figure out how do we, in a scalable fashion, how do we deploy? How do we utilize space? So to me, that's what gets us to, while it's a lower percent growth rate for the next 5 years for sort of office integration of collaboration technology, it's still growth, and there is potential to exceed, particularly as we look at things like AI coming in, which I know we haven't really talked a lot about yet, but certainly that toolkit and what it's able to do, just from a meeting productivity, a experience optimization, a remote monitoring servicing perspective, lots of potential, even if it is really more potential at this point than actuality, as Peter has even written about in some of our latest research on the topic. So lots to come there, lots of exciting things.
Yeah, I would like to kind of jump into that. What are we on the precipice of? Because you've made some very good points, and definitely we would agree, Jonathan and I, in our work as consultants and designers here in the Oceania market, we are 100% seeing large corporate, large government already making those changes, already realizing, the technology is better. We can repurpose the physical design of these spaces to get better experiences. There's also a lot of data now, end of 2023, showing what size rooms get used more, and it's actually the smaller sort of 4 to 6 person rooms, rather than the big, long boardrooms. They're used less and less. Definitely, there's an uptick as we talked about earlier in the call here, in those media enabled spaces. So whether you're doing a podcast or recording videos, and they range from little small rooms, we've done plenty of those, haven't we, Jonathan, to much bigger rooms with huge LED video screens and almost TV quality cameras, TV studio quality cameras and the like. There's quite a range there, but the fact that people are taking the time to invest in those is saying a lot. The other big one is that sort of very large space, multi-purpose space, or town hall space, as it's sometimes called on architectural plans, where you can get large groups of people in and have all sorts of different presentations, events. That seems to be an experience, I think, in the office that organisations are trying to create, which they didn't really focus that much attention on in the past. So what are we on the precipice of? Start of 2024, AI we've talked about. Realistically, what do you think we can see in the next 12 months with respect to AI, whether it be in office or in other markets?
Well, I'd say a couple of places. One is the workflow. I think we're on the precipice. But the precipice, I'm a little hesitant to say we're on the precipice, because I think it's going to be a gradual process as folks kind of know that AI can maybe help them do their work a little easier. But there's some barriers to entry, like, cost, if you want to use the latest version of ChatGPT-4. And then also just like thinking of like when to use it, when is it an efficient use of your time. But in terms of what our data suggested, is that it's going to matter in workflow on the back end. I think, just to throw an idea out there that I think will be helpful is, there is a step in the integration process where a super technical team maybe has, created this solution, and it now needs to like reach the end users, and they need to understand how to use it. And there's a communications process there. That isn't always the smoothest when you have like a super technical team trying to just stay in plain English to a non-technical user base. And that's a perfect, example of where, what these LLMs can help words become plain English, and bridge a communication gap. Throwing that out there as one example. That's, precipice may be a little strong. I think it's going to be an evolution, but that's a space. And then I'll say the other one, I'm really going to, since we're talking about corporate office, I really want to talk about the less sexy, like not the general capable, like LLM style, deep learning AI. But talk about the specific AI, the ones that are like, for example, a microphone that is using machine learning. It's really like, maybe it's been around for a few years, and maybe when it first came out 3 years ago, they didn't stick AI on it. It was just a smart microphone, you know?
Yeah.
But what it did was filtered out all of the background noise, tried to level out voices, identify that's at the back of the room, this is at the front of the room. It should sound about the same when it goes out to other users. That probably does deserve the term AI, but it's a specific one. It's very different from LM. I'll say the same thing for the PTZ that's pointing at the right person. Even on your team software that's bringing the right face onto the screen, especially when you're talking about that hybrid meeting where you maybe have 4 people in the room. It's got to go to the face that's talking so that it can match that experience that folks have when everyone is remote and from their office. So I'll really highlight that as sort of the precipice of these specific uses, not the LLM ones that are like, ChatGPT and driving crazy amounts of Silicon Valley investment cash, but these software enhancing hardware ones that I think are going to have quite a big impact, especially in the corporate office market, especially in the conference and collaboration space.
To expand on that, Peter, I 100% agree with what you're saying. The last year, AI has become this huge buzzword, but we forget that, microphones and cameras had smart features. If we reverse, 5-10 years, everything was smart.
Right.
And really, that was a very primitive form of AI. So it has been this very gradual process of improving this automation and these smart features, which are now called AI.
Yeah. So here's some investment advice for free. When someone says something's AI, just be a little careful, right? Like,
yeah.
A lot of marketing folks are going to stick AI on some technology that's good. Don't let you get yourself carried away, because it might be pretty similar to what you saw last year before they put AI on it. So,
exactly.
Just swap out the label. But as an extension of that, I think, looking forward to 2024, we're going to see, and you touched on this when you said software-driven hardware. What I think we're going to start to see is, a hardware product that goes into a space, but it evolves over time because the software isn't residing on the device itself, but it's phoning home to a server or something in the cloud that is then running the algorithm or, has a piece of machine learning to improve the experience. And that's kind of going to be an evergreen product. So, like ChatGPT, it's evolved over versions. And I think we're going to see that in hardware devices as well. So like a microphone, day one, it might be great. It has this particular sense of auto-tuning where it, helps people's voices. But, 6 months down the line, they release a server update and all of a sudden your microphone has improved again because that server-based software is actually driving the functionality of your hardware device in your space.
Agreed. I think that's something we saw come out of our 2023 forecast for the industry. So every year we do our forecast update. It's called our IOTA, basically Industry Outlook Trends Analysis. It's essentially a forecast of spending on technology and solutions. And one of the things that jumped out of that is exactly as you're saying, Jonathan. Typically, in past years, we had actually been watching a phenomenon by which software was increasingly hard to separate out from the hardware. It was bundled in, right? So they were selling it as one complete package. You had the control system, you had the hardware, endpoints, all sorts of things kind of bundled together. In the 2023 forecast, we actually saw the reverse trend happening. So where software is starting to be split out again, sold as its own sort of capability set. Let's say it's content management or a control or some other capability. So I agree with you. I think we're going the other way now, where software hardware are being decoupled a little bit, because at the cloud level or server level, you're able to do some optimization across your installation, across your experience. And that, I would agree with Peter that I think AI, its fundamental benefit as we get, or precipice, if we want to go full precipice or short, long-term sort of adoption rate, either way, to me, the impact for us is how can it help us better optimize the experiences, server level, cloud level, those sorts of things. That to me is where we're going to see a lot of meaningful impact. That said, I certainly can't ignore the content, the generative AI sort of capabilities, what that does for business flows, processes. Certainly, yes, it's useful as a prime the pump sort of mechanism inside business. Maybe it starts to get involved in design and scoping for integrators to kind of shortcut the process a little bit. I would say generative AI for digital signage certainly has some use case there with got a lot of displays out there now that need to be fed with content. And so, sure, generative AI can help you do that. If you're a company, an enterprise who's looking to keep the content fresh, the content real fresh.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, I'm interested in kind of content as service is something we've talked about over the years for an integrator, even who's helping deploy digital signage installation. Is that an add-on opportunity to help them kind of keep utility and freshness to the device? But
so often, Sean, that
impact,
particular application. I mean, there's always been interest for years now in digital signage. Oh, so cool. I don't have to print expensive
signage,
sort of signage and put it all around the place. I can have these digital ones. But as advisors, we've always sort of said, okay, fine. Now, do you have people or a plan to keep the information on those screens up to date and interesting? No, we don't have that.
Right.
So using AI to do that, I think is a bit of a deal breaker. That could really, or deal maker, I should say, that could really open up a lot of opportunities, I would have thought, in that particular sector, because now all of a sudden you don't need so many people to be constantly looking at that and managing that. It could be somewhat automated and still keeping those screens fresh and interesting.
Yeah.
And one thing I'll just build on that, our research suggests, kind of confirms, I think, some there's a lot of consensus on that unmonitored AI is still a fair bit away, like AI that can just go out to an end user without having someone at your company read through it, check through it. We're years away from that, probably. Who knows? Leaps happen, clearly. So a lot of the question is, how quickly can someone at your company sign off on the AI? And when it's an application like, the AI wrote some software, that can be really difficult to process, really slow to vet. But when it's AI made this standalone image or even this video, it's super quick. You can just glance at it and say, like, oh, that looks great. And let me read the 25 words on that. Yep. Grammatically correct. Yep. Like sponsor appropriate. Great. It's so fast, right? So
all of a sudden you're the editor rather than the content creator.
And an easy edit. It's an easy edit. It's not just, because some things are difficult to edit, or review, right? Because it's not maybe like editing, for the photoshopping is hard, but you can have it print out 25 different, similar versions, and just leaf through that and pick like, these 20 are crap, and these 5 are great, and I only need 3, so great. And it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, it's a tool set.
Like I think we're talking about, getting back to the beginning, a real value add that AI can potentially be bringing to businesses, streamlining what they're currently doing and, maybe delivering more faster and maybe better. So I'll give you another example that Jonathan and I were sort of spitballing. This might be a little bit further off, but let's take the example of, you're talking about there, Sean, the separation of hardware and software, and Jonathan kind of got that started. But let's take the example of, you've got a room, and the room could pretty much be designed by AI, maybe. You give it some data based on the physical dimensions that or the physical properties of the space that you put the data into the model. The AI sort of comes up with optimal designs based on what it is you're trying to achieve. It breaks the back of the design, right? And then a human with experience can sort of go in there and sort of tweak and improve, and again, not doing the whole thing from scratch. And then when you get to implementation, again, based on the information that is already known, the equipment gets installed, it could already sort of tune itself to a pretty close final level, maybe 80%, 90%, maybe even more, So then all you're really doing as commissioners is the final fine tuning. And then in the future, after people using the space a little bit, the first couple of months, further fine tuning is done automatically by the AI. I mean, how far away do we think we are from that?
There's a lot of pieces in there. I think that in the optimized state you're describing, I'd give it 3 to 5 probably, just because, probably on the longer end, just because think about all the, from design to room optimization to post-install kind of support optimization, upgrade pathing, monitoring. Some of those things are coming soon, some are longer. I think, though, the point really is, for the foreseeable future, as kind of Peter teed up, it's a tool set that can be utilized by someone, but AI needs a conductor. It needs an operator. It needs somebody to focus it, to review it, to validate it, to vet it. We're not at the stage. I've heard a lot, both Peter and I have heard from noted experts on this topic of, look at what's happened in self-driving cars. We're still actually years away from self-driving cars because the accident rate is so high. As one AI expert said to us, AI doesn't actually know anything. So it's only reacting to data that it has. It's easy to throw it off its trail. They use as an example, let's pick a stop sign that's half obscured by a TV. AI doesn't know that it's a stop sign. It needs the whole perfect image. And so it doesn't react well to impartial information. So take that into business. There's a lot of use case you're describing where, because it doesn't have really the knowledge that a designer truly has to be able to tweak and optimize, there's a lot of subtleties and sort of contextual information that it would be missing, and the true brain to be able to think creatively and uniquely about it. So we're a long way from just sort of AI, the notion of AI taking over and being able to handle all that soup to nuts. But as a tool set that can be leveraged for efficiency's sake by your team, for sure, it's already there in some ways to help us to kind of leapfrog or overcome inertia to kind of get the process started. But I am intrigued. I will say that some of the tools I'm seeing come down the pipe from places like Microsoft on Teams Room, and what they're doing with some of their AI deployment for using Copilot and other things, really has the possibility to aid the integrator a lot, or the AV manager who's just trying to keep up with, are my spaces being used? Where's the breakdown? What's happening? What equipment's failing? Just troubleshooting, problem identification and resolution, I think is improving a lot as well. I mean, optimization of an audio or video signal, we've already talked about that mics and cameras have been doing that with embedded for quite some time. So next level is across a larger installation. So it's coming. But I'm a little more, I'd say, I'm not pessimistic, just realistic about.
Just realistic, yeah. It's not that close. Yeah. Sure.
2 points I'd add, because this is actually something that I think one of the things, like kind of the subtopics I spent the most on, honestly, in researching the AI paper that we wrote.
Oh, yeah.
One is training data set. Like you talk about, if you feed it the right data, then it can, create the design. And like, it has to have seen that process happen a bunch to learn how it works, right? And maybe it's more feasible. Like maybe there's more, like, I think you'd have to train a specific AI for this, and you'd have to have a big data set, and you'd have to have a bunch of capability or work with the company, to make it good, right? So I think that's problem one. And then there's the other point I would definitely want to separate is that there's new build where everything is sort of like you're working for like architectural drawings and like a plan, and that's what it is. Like that's what the space is. And there's like refreshing a space where there's really no substitute for like walking and making sure the plans work, and like what are the quirks that have like developed, in the 20 years since this building was built, when these plans were fully accurate. So I think like for new spaces, like, that 3 to 5 Sean's talking about, like maybe that's realistic. I think for in person, like updating a space, especially updating a space that's like more than a few years old, like I think it starts to get a lot trickier, because I think it really starts to need a professional, like, most people listening, like to go and see and like check a lot of things, and use their expertise. And AI won't see that, and it won't come through in data that well, and especially not training data set, because you'd really have to like spent a lot of time specifically taking back and writing down and in a way that like hasn't been practical, hasn't been needed, because you can rely on the skilled professionals in our field to dock it out.
The proof point for me on that is, think about, Jonathan, David, like installations that you guys have done. How often would you say one job is exactly like the next?
Never.
Right?
Not once.
There you go. That's, as Peter just said, there is no large learning model that would accommodate for every single one of the situations you've done. And so AI, we can't forget, AI doesn't extrapolate well. It can't take a data set and apply it to something it's never seen before, because it has a high likelihood of hallucinating, has a high likelihood of producing an undesirable outcome. So that's exactly the point. The human brain is better at saying, you know what, I saw something like this in the past. Okay, well, if I tweak it in this way, that's incredibly advanced. So good news for you guys, and for, I think, for the industry.
We still got jobs. Awesome. Yeah.
The integrator bot's not coming anytime soon.
All right.
Not that we see.
Look, I just want to pose one last question to all three of you individually. I don't know, in 60 seconds or less, what excites you the most for the year ahead in terms of Pro AV, and more in the sense of the positive, I suppose, impact or benefits it's going to have to either the AV market or end users?
Sure. I love what's happening with the experience economy. Peter and I have talked about this a lot, just seeing, let's use as sort of overblown examples at this point, the Sphere in Vegas, Taylor Swift concerts, what have you. I just think those are just such great examples of what's possible with AV now at the highest end. But high end informs the more mid and low end, right? All of that kind of inspires the market. So as I look at that, and as I look at even as our own forecast, we see a lot of growth potential around exceptional experience. And that can get translated down into even the more mundane stuff. So I love that notion. It's what excites me about AV in general. And I think we're kind of at a really great moment where that starts to play out in bigger and more exciting ways.
Awesome. What about you, Pete?
I think I'm excited for the next step in conferencing and collaboration. We've seen end users kind of taking a step back to reevaluate. And I think that's why we've seen manufacturers finally sort out their supply issues, so now they can start to innovate and really focus on building for new needs rather than just getting supply out the door. And I think that's kind of creating the feedback cycle we need to really start to solve these challenging meeting issues that exist and are a problem for our industry, but are also soluble. And once we put all our minds to it, end user, manufacturer, distributor, integrator, I think we're going to see some cool things. So we're starting to see that growth lift. Next year, like it's maybe the start is next year. I'm not promising the end of next year, but that's what I'm excited for, seeing that get going next year.
Fantastic. And lastly, you, Jonathan, what's got you excited, mate?
Well, bit of a different tact. There's always time pressure when designing systems and creating solutions for customers, and that's both from a consultant side and an integrator side. So what I am really excited about is improving tools. We're talking about AI not being the holistic solution, but there are small tools that allow us to design more efficiently or integrate more efficiently. And what that really does is allow more time, more thinking time, more clear headspace to focus on the challenges around improving the experience for customers. Like you were saying, Peter, there's new products, and now we're going to more headspace to actually think about, well, how can we best use these products to provide better experiences to our customers? And that's kind of supported by those new tools that makes the mundane work a lot quicker and a lot more efficient, so we're not bogged down in that.
Yeah, that wraps it up nicely.
Awesome.
All right, well, I would like to thank you, Sean and Peter, so much for taking the time to spend with Jonathan and I having a chat about what happened in 2023 and what we can look forward to in AV in 2024 and perhaps beyond. Some very exciting stuff there. We talked a lot about AI in the end, and I think the summary there is a lot of potential, but still very early days. And it's going to be exciting to sort of be a part of watching that all unfold, before us. And, there was a panel I was a part of earlier in the year where a representative from the manufacturer, Harman, was asked a question, what do you think about AI? And he said, look, literally, it's so early, we're baking some of the AI features and tech into some of our products, but we have no idea what's going to be useful and what isn't. So we're putting some stuff into our products, giving it to the market, and the market will tell us what's useful and what's not. So we're probably still not very, very far down the track from that conversation, which was only in August 2023. So I guess we'll see a lot more of that, and it'll be certainly exciting times ahead.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks again, all of you, and we'll look forward to having you on the show sometime again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for having us, David.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Tech Simple podcast. To like, share, or discover more episodes, head over to Spotify. If you'd like to talk to us about AV in your workplace or learning environment, book an initial discovery call with David or Jonathan at konnectus.com.au. And remember,